In a couple of days, Bravado Gaming will embark on their next exciting journey, and that is Project Destiny 2.0. Now, of course, if you've been following the international or South African Counter-Strike scene for a couple of years, you'd realize that this isn't the first iteration of the project. Project Destiny was something that took place in 2018 at the start of the year when Bravado Gaming sent over their team to North America. That was Detrony, Elusive, JT, Sonic, Fady, and Coach TC. And they went across and they lived in North America for pretty much the entirety of 2018, where they looked to try and stake a claim there, put South Africa on the map. And it was a massively successful project when you look at the fact that a number of the players went on to have careers internationally, play with some of the best orgs like Cloud9, Sonic and JT did. Of course, Sonic, playing for Wildcard Gaming now, JT playing for Complexity, TC coaching Complexity as well. So there was a lot of success that stemmed from that project. I mean, the project in itself was, would be considered a success in the sense that South Africa became a force to be reckoned with internationally. I mean, that team made it to the top 25 in the world. They qualified. They did very well at DreamHack Winter Jongshapeng, where they placed second after losing in the final to that Finnish Ents team with Alexi B, who were just, steamrolling everybody that year. And yeah, that was pretty much when things started to taper off and come to an end. Of course, December 2018, it came out that Bravado Gaming, the project was in peril, and things kind of fell apart from there. Players went into different directions. Detrony came back home, and that was actually the end of the Bravado Gaming Counter-Strike division for a while. Up until I think it was 2021 was when they returned. Might have been 2020 actually, and then Detrony came back the year after. During COVID, they restarted their Counter-Strike division, and they found some decent success over those years. They found some good success online. They won Comic-Con 21 and 23, and they then decided that they want to try and make something happen internationally once again. So, Bravado Gaming have decided to send their Counter-Strike team overseas, this time to Europe, not going to North America like they did in 2018. This time they'll be going to Serbia in Belgrade. So there you have it. The announcement of Project Destiny 2.0 is live. And in a couple days, the players will be heading across to Serbia, where they will make their mark and look to try and settle themselves. So for anybody who doesn't know, South Africa, as is suggested in the name, is based at the southern tip of Africa, which means we are isolated geographically, significantly so. It means that competition is very difficult to come by. It's not like the island sort of setup with evolution where islands tend to evolve a lot quicker because they're isolated and it's survival of the fittest. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Because we get far less opportunities, there's a far smaller player pool, a lot less investments. It means that we fall way far behind the curve here in South Africa. So anytime we do get an opportunity to compete internationally, we're just so many paces behind the rest of the teams there that we're never really able to compete. I mean, there'll be moments, there'll be rounds, there might be a map here or there, but there's never any, serious competition where we make deep runs in competitions or, stand a chance of actually winning the event itself. So what that means is we have to send a team overseas on a long-term basis to be able to catch up with everybody and show what we're really capable of, because it's never been a problem of individual skill. It's never been an issue that we haven't had players who are good enough mechanically to compete overseas. It just comes down to experience, opportunities, decision-making, and those sorts of things where you want to play against teams routinely who are better than you so you can learn from them, where you just don't get that in South Africa once you reach the top, and you can reach the top pretty quickly in this country, especially with how often things change. There's so many factors which handicap the South African scene as well, like load shedding and facilities, like I said, opportunities as well. So once you've reached the top, really there's not much more you can do. You can't scrim teams in Europe because the ping is too high. You can't compete in international qualifiers because we aren't eligible to take part. So you kind of you finish it, you complete it, mate, don't you? As Jay would say from the in-betweeners, completed it, mate, is what these Bravado Gaming players can say about the South African scene, because they have. I mean, they won Comic-Con 23, they're recognized as the best players in the country, and now they get a shot at stepping things up to the next level, which I think is great. I think it's really good that these guys, these South African Counter-Strike players, are going to get a chance to go overseas on a long-term basis and realize their dream, at least stand a chance of making that happen. I think it's going to be a very exciting part of these guys' lives. So um, I don't want to focus too heavily on comparing Project Destiny 1.0 with 2.0. I think that they are unique projects, completely different time frames, and even just times in where the Counter Strike scene is at in general. A lot has changed, a lot has shifted. So I don't want to spend too much time comparing them. So I'm going to just get a few comparisons out the way first, nice and early now. Of course, one of the biggest advantages that this Project Destiny has over the previous one is that this one is based in Serbia, in Europe. Pretty sure it's actually in the exact same time zone as South Africa, um, Central Europe summertime, so they'll roll things back by a year when it comes through to winter, but back by an hour when it comes through to daylight savings time. But that's so much more manageable than what America ever was for Bravado, or Mexico ever was for ATK, where from South Africa you're in the far west of the world. There's like an 8 hour time difference or something like that. So to try and stay in touch with friends, with family, with your social lives is just so much more challenging than what it's going to be for these guys in Serbia. They can actually like maintain their relationships, stay in tune with everything that's happening at home. It's going to be way easier for South Africans to end up watching their games as well, to get to, follow them through tournaments. Um, so I think they've got a huge advantage in that regard, playing in Europe compared to going across to North America. You've got to imagine that the travel would be way easier for the team, for the players, for the org as well, from South Africa to Belgrade. It's a much shorter flight than what it ever was going across to North America. Logistically, it's going to be way easier to organize flights. It's going to be way easier to organize visas, lodging. I'm sure the laws are way more relaxed in Serbia compared to what they are in North America to attain, visas and places to stay for foreigners and all the rest. So in those regards, I actually think it's a huge advantage for this team. I think they're going to find it way easier to stay in touch with their lives here in South Africa as well, which I think is a very important part of their success, because they're going to a foreign country where they, don't even speak English. Of course they do, but it's not like it's their first or probably not even their second language there. So, you know, for them to still be able to maintain relationships with people back here is going to be very important for them to just remain grounded, and when things get difficult, it's not like they feel like they're in some completely foreign country where they don't have any connection to home. So I think that's definitely going to help. um, on average, this group of players are slightly older than the previous group, and of course, Detri and Elusive, they carried the average age up a bit in the previous project. TC Coach would have as well, but then Sonic, JT, and Fady were all very young at that point. Between 17, 18, and 20 years old, if I'm not mistaken, kind of thing. So it was a younger group of players in that regard. Now you've got Doru, Vils, Triton, Marsh as well, who, yeah, in their early 20s kind of thing. Doru maybe a little bit older than them, but still, 22 to 24 kind of thing. A little bit more maturity, head on their shoulders. They've lived life a bit more. They've got a better understanding of what they want out of life as well, I'm sure. And will just, like I said, be more disciplined and more mature going into this project, which will definitely make it easier for them to try and find some stability, I'd imagine. I think there's also much better relationships in this group compared to what there was in the previous group. I mean, remember, they picked up JT a couple months before they ended up going across. Okay, it was longer than that. They had him for about maybe like 8 or 9 months in 2017 before they went across in 2018. But you got to remember that these guys, this core of Marsh, Doru, and Vulge, Doru and Vulge have been going back for a very long time. Of course, Marsh and Vulge are brothers, so the relationship there is fantastic. And then Triton joined the team towards the end of 22 and 123 Comic Con with Bravado. So they've been together for a long time. They've got a lot of experience playing together. They've got developed very solid relationships with each other as well, which will definitely help, when times get tough, to make sure that everybody feels included. So, yeah, I think that's a big advantage for them. When you compare the players on an individual level, you probably got to give the edge to the previous group, just in terms of the level that they were at when they went overseas. Keep in mind the South African scene was probably more competitive at that point as well, so it would have been easier for them to be competitive, just because there would have been more practice, a higher level in general. When it comes to ceiling, I mean, that's a different conversation altogether. I'm not saying that they were better players across the board. I just think that they were probably at a higher level once they had moved across compared to what these players will be at. Um, but either way, it's a very strong group of players individually. So those are the comparisons I've got for the most part. It really doesn't go too deep in that department. I'm going to move across to some facts now for you guys, so you're all clued up and you know exactly what to expect. Apologies if you can hear the construction work going on outside. That's just one of those things, ambient sounds, living in a complex. But yeah. So, some of the facts. Right. The first fact, as I've said, is they're going to be living in Belgrade, Serbia. So it's going to be much easier for them to travel. It's also a beautiful city, apparently, and there's a lot. It's a central hub in Europe, which is very cool. You know, it's the most accessible country in Europe as well, just because they're not a part of the Schengen region. So it's much easier to get in and out of the country. And yeah, there's a good social life there. There's a lot of other international teams that compete from Serbia and Belgrade. A couple of the Russian teams have moved across there because of the political situation, because of the war. And then there's a lot of teams that boot camp from Serbia as well. Of course, there's the Relog facilities, there's Yanko's facilities. So it's a good hub for international Counter-Strike. They're going to be traveling there on the 10th of May, as far as I know. So that's just 3 days out as of the recording of this video. Of course, as I mentioned, Doru, Vilj, Marsh, and Triton are the team with Coach LeBishop. They don't have their fifth player announced yet, and we will be getting into that a bit more just now. Detrny has already been to Serbia. So he's already traveled across to Belgrade. He spent a couple weeks there, and he has felt things out. He's seen what it's like. They've got a property already. They've got everything sorted. And I think it's great that Detrany's already gone ahead and scouted everything so that he's been able to lay that foundation for the team. Once they arrive, everything's already resolved and in place for them to just slot in and do their thing. Another important piece of information is the time frame and the goals for this project. Now, Bravado Gaming have come out and said that this is a 2-year long project that's going to be running through to the midway of 2026. Now, that's a really big statement. That's 2 years they're going to be looking to run this project and fund this project for, which is a massive runway for it to find success, right? And I'm really keen to see how things will develop over those 2 years. They plan, or the goal is to reach the top 30 in the process and then also qualify for a major. So that's the outlook for Bravado Gaming here with Project Destiny 2.0. 2-year time frame, reach the top 30, qualify for the major. Those are the basic goals. That's the basic outlook going forward into the project. So that's what the players have to work with as a framework as they do shift across. But like I said, 2 years is a very long time. I mean, remember the last project had about 9 months where it was running, and look at how much they were able to accomplish in 9 months. So yeah, I'm keen to see exactly how things will play out over those 2 years. I mean, to think that we're going to have a Bravado Gaming in Europe, in Serbia for 2 years, rubbing shoulders with the international Counter-Strike scene, putting that South African flag on the map, is an incredibly exciting prospect. So I'm really happy to see that. I am going to pause the recording now so I can close my windows, hopefully shut out some of the sound, and then we get into the positives. All right, hopefully that will curb some of the construction noises, but let's now get into the advantages of this project and the positives in general. Now, like I've already spoken about, Detrany did go to Serbia to try and scout things out for the team already. Now, having Detrany a part of this project in general is just going to be a massive advantage for the team because he was a part of Project Destiny, the original version of the project, right? So he was there. He faced all the challenges. He was the one who figured it out, and they had no idea what to expect at all when they did it the first time round. And he was there, he was the captain, the IGL at the forefront of the project the entire time. And now, from a bit more of a background perspective, he's leading this project once again. Of course, he's not going to be playing, but he knows the challenges, the strife. He knows what to expect, and therefore they can prepare a lot better for the issues that are going to come up along the way, because Detrany's got that experience. So I think it's actually invaluable that, we're seeing Bravado run this project back after doing it the first time a few years ago, because we saw ATK try it as well. Things fell through there over time. Let's say we saw Nixon now try and do it again. We would have 3 different South African orgs all trying to send a South African team over for the first time. and all kind of starting from scratch, right? Which is something that happens all the time in the South African scene. We have a team who goes overseas for an international event, they don't do so well, they come back, and then it's a different group of players who go over for the next event, and then it's just rinse and repeat. Excuse me. And they're not actually able to make any, significant progress because it's not the same group of players, or it's not the same team leading that group of players who can then help them develop and help them be better prepared for what they can expect. So I think definitely being a part of the project here is going to help massively, just in terms of the direction, the guiding, the planning, and knowing what to expect here, and what the challenges will be, even if the players might not. Daytrony certainly will. So that's one of the big advantages. Another one is that we're going to have South Africa even further represented on the international map. Of course, JT and TC carrying the flag high in complexity. We've got Mistim in the Young Ninjas team. We've got Sonic, who's playing in Wildcard Gaming, and now we're going to have Bravado in Europe, and they're going to be competing with the full team there. So it's always great. We always celebrate having South Africans overseas. Being able to compete with overseas teams is always a privilege and an honor for us, and an opportunity that is not normal. And I think that's the one thing that separates South African teams from the rest of the world, is that we don't take it for granted, right? We realize what a special opportunity this actually is, and therefore we really give it everything we've got. Whereas if you're in a world where Counter Strike is the norm and it's far easier to make it as a professional player, you maybe don't really realize how special that opportunity is, right? So I think that's something that is going to be an advantage for them, and we just love to have that representation and continue to display what we're capable of. And we always keep fighting, right? We've been doing this for years, just fighting for more opportunities. And if you're not going to notice us here, we're going to come over there and we're going to show you what we can do. And eventually you'll be like, okay, if these guys continue to cook up with really strong teams and players, maybe we should give the region more opportunity. Not to say we haven't been given opportunity, to be fair. We've had quite a lot afforded to us in some areas that we haven't really taken advantage of as a scene, as a community. So yeah, it goes both ways, I suppose. Another one of these advantages would be that it's not like this is the first time this Bravado team is going overseas. Of course, they played at ESL Challenger Katowice, where they didn't win either of their games, but they played really well against Ents. They came close. They narrowly lost out there. And then against Party Astronauts as well, it looked like it was going to be, well, it was a competitive series. Unfortunately, not competitive enough to get across the line, but there's experience there for them. They then obviously played at the RMR now for the Copenhagen Major in the Middle East, and unfortunately that didn't really go the way they would have liked. They even acknowledged that by their standards, it wasn't the standard that they were expecting to be at. So yeah, I guess that overseas experience will help them once they get there. They would have rubbed shoulders with some of the better players. They would have scrimmed as well, and they would have got a better idea of what to expect. Um, I think the one thing that I'm really excited about is seeing Volge and Triton overseas, because you could make a case for them being the two best South African players in recent times. Of course, Sonic carries the mantle of the best player of all time in South Africa quite comfortably, but when it comes down to the mechanics, I reckon Volge and Triton would give Sonic a run for his money. These guys are just ridiculously good with the mouse and keyboard, man, and I'm just keen to see like what level they can actually reach when they get the opportunities, when they've got the experience, they've got the facilities, they've got the events. What is the ceiling for these guys? Because as far as I can tell, I've watched and cast a lot of Counter Strike, but there isn't much between these players and the guys that I've seen at like the top of tier two. Mechanically, they're actually right up there. So when it comes to their individual level, I think Volge and Triton won't have any problem holding their own. In fact, might even turn some heads while they're there. These guys who are all going overseas now, of course, their main focus is Bravado Gaming. But look at what happened with JT, TC, Sonic. They've been noticed by international teams and orgs, and they've been picked up thereafter. So you've got to remember that you're playing for your career here, and of course, this is this project is where your focus is now. But you've got to remember you're constantly showing the world what you're capable of, and you never know what opportunities might stem from that. Speaking a bit more on Volge in particular, and I'll speak about Doru after this as well, because it's a sort of a similar theme, not quite the same, but of course Volge went across to North America with ATK, and I don't know how successful he had considered that, not because of results, but he ended up coming back. I don't think it was a great environment. I mean, listen, I'm not casting any aspersions, and I don't have the juice for you guys or the tea, but um, I think he was in a completely different point in his life. You can see how much he's changed mentally, physically, as a player. He's way more mature, takes on a lot more responsibility. I mean, you wouldn't really recognize Vilj if you compared him with what we had then, or who he was then, and who he is today. So for Vilj to now get another opportunity is so rare. As a South African, to even get a shot to go overseas to compete is incredibly rare in itself. To then get a second one is actually unheard of in this country. So for Vilj now to get another shot to kind of go overseas and show the world what he's really capable of, and yeah, we saw glimpses of it when he was in North America, but now we really. This is going to be an opportunity where he's in a much better place in his life. He's in a much better place in his career. I think we're going to see a beautiful story unfold, and I'm very excited for Vilj that he's got this shot again. And to see what he can make of this one. And I tell you what, you won't get another one after this, mate. So you best make it. You best, you got to make the best of this and take full advantage, because these things don't come around twice for anybody else. You've never seen a South African player, go overseas twice on the basis of a full-time project. Okay, maybe Fady, there's an exception for you, but let's be real. So Vilj, make sure that you take full advantage of this, man. We all know what talent, how ridiculously talented you are, and what you're capable of. So go out there and do your thing, man. And then Doru is the next one who, you've got to imagine that this is very special for, because he was a part of the ATK team before they ended up going overseas. And I mean, he was one of the most stable parts of that roster. Remember how ATK dominated the South African scene in 2020? I think it was in that online era. They were just completely unbeatable. Everybody else was playing for second best, and Doru was, a formidable player in that roster. And then when they ended up actually going overseas, Doru wasn't able to commit to the project back then for whatever the reason might have been. And so he missed out. He missed out on that shot to go as a South African player and play overseas and see what he could do internationally. And that's so brutal. I mean, so few people get an opportunity to go overseas, and he got that opportunity, but for circumstances that were maybe out of his control, maybe there were, who knows. He wasn't able to go, but now he is. And not only is he going to be going as a player, he's going to be going as a captain, as an IGL, and as a man, someone who's now more developed in their life, more experienced, more mature, more disciplined. You can see with the interviews and when you chat with him in general, he's got a really good head on his shoulders, not just talking about his good looks either. And yeah, I'm just really stoked for Doru that he's getting his shot now, because he was deprived of that a couple of years ago, and now we're going to get to see him overseas, and I think that's great. I'm really happy for him, and I'm keen to see what he can accomplish as an IGL. He's got the reins now of this project, and he's got Triton and Doru, who are Triton and Vilj, who are South Africa's two most talented players at the moment. He's got these talismans at his disposal, and this is just a wonderful opportunity for him. Of course, the one player I haven't spoken on is Marsh, Village's brother, and he's also very young, and he's just one of those highly impactful players who, brings so much to the team. He's very robust, and he's not afraid. He's one of those like ruthless, relentless Counter-Strike players who plays his own brand of Counter Strike as well. He's not afraid to do his own thing, kind of play by his own rules. Sometimes you wonder, like, is that the best play to be made? But he's always got a plan in his mind, and I think he's actually got a really good eye for the game. Probably underrated in that regard is Marsh, and that's why he doesn't just trip over backwards in these situations where he's in game and he's gotten behind the defense or he's been able to catch somebody off guard. It's his game sense, right? So Marsh offers a lot to the team to allow, someone like Vilj and Triton to, perform at the peak of their level, because he's filling in the gaps. He's the guy at backstage there making sure that the show must go on and that everybody can perform to the best of their level. So another invaluable piece, of course. And for him now to get to go overseas, I mean, I remember casting him back in 2019 at Comic Con. Well, I was an analyst at that event, and just some blonde hair ragamuffin who was lending me his mouse pad, and now developed into one of the best players in South Africa, and he's going to go overseas and carry the flag. So yeah, super stoked for Marsh. I know that there was even a point where I think last year he was considering taking a break from Counter Strike, and then he got the opportunity to join Bravado, and he hasn't looked back since. So yeah, really keen to see what he can do alongside his brother as well, and what he'll be able to accomplish. So I'd say that those are kind of the things that I'm the most excited to see. I'd say the advantages, the positives in general of the project. Of course, Vilge and Marsh, as I mentioned, the brothers. It's funny that we have Sent and Andreas kind of passing on the Sent and Detrony passing on the baton to Marsh and Vilge. Um, but now shifting to some concerns, because there are some concerns, not many. Two main concerns for me, I'd say. And the first one is a glaringly obvious concern. You're not going to get any points for guessing this one, guys. And it's the fact that they don't have a fifth. They do not have a fifth player at the moment, which I think is a big issue for them going overseas. They've mentioned they've got a short list of players. Excuse me. They've got a short list of players who they're considering to add to the team, but they're not just missing a fifth, they're missing an AWPer as well. We know they had Slowy before, who missed out on the ATK international project. He's not going to be joining this one either, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest. Would have been great to see Slowy overseas. But he's a married man now, different responsibilities, different lifestyle. They played with Poison at the Copenhagen RMR, and that didn't go too well. And I mean, when you look at the options in South Africa, there aren't that many where you could slot a player in and know that he's going to have that experience to the degree where they'll be able to start at a decent level internationally. It'll take a while for them to catch anybody up. So I think they've decided to just leave that spot open and then pick up somebody when they're overseas. It's a huge gamble, man. It's a huge gamble. Of course, the previous Project Destiny was way more finalized, was way more stable when it went overseas. I know that this is a 2-year project, so at least they've got time on their side. But to go overseas without even a guaranteed project in terms of knowing that you've got a set of 5 players that's going to work is a big gamble here from Bravado. And I understand why they've made it. What choice did they have? Well, honestly, they were kind of forced into this situation, but it's way less than ideal. I mean, not only is the AWP a super important role to fill to try and get him to match with the playstyle with the rest of the team, make sure that they're all on the same level, have the same goals and aspirations, the same sort of playstyle, the same way they see the game. That in itself is already going to be an issue, but it goes way deeper than that. The problem is you've got 4 South Africans who are going to be adding an international player to the team, and you're just going to have like cultural differences. You're going to have a group of 4 players who are very close to each other, and then you're going to have an outsider who, they need to integrate. You got to think about like the cultural differences, joking about load shedding and the struggles of South Africa. It's just going to be very difficult for somebody from Europe to try and relate to what they'll be talking about, and maybe they could feel a bit left out in some ways. So I think it's very important here for the 4 Bravado players. To make sure they make that fifth person feel included in the team, make sure that they explain inside jokes, that they never really have an us and him kind of mentality. They've got to make sure they add him to the friend group, make sure that they make that effort for him to feel involved, to feel included, because I feel like that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is just having 4 South Africans and 1 European, and just making sure that he's on the same wavelength, because it's a completely different lifestyle here and there, that's for sure. So that's my one serious concern for Bravado, is that going into this project without an AWPer, without a fifth, adding a European, the cultural differences, the language barriers, and all the rest. It will be a challenge. Not insurmountable, not impossible for them to navigate, and thankfully for them, there are a ton of very talented AWPers out there, at the FPLC level, guys who are outside of the top 100 who haven't been discovered yet. There are ridiculously talented AWPers out there, so it shouldn't be a problem trying to find one, but the problem will be trying to integrate them into the roster. And then another concern would be, I think Doru's individual level has been a bit rough at some points with the team. He's never been regarded as the like out and out star player, unless you go back to like 2019 WRG kind of thing. I mean, he's good individually, don't get me wrong, he bangs in the server, but it's just that when you reach that next level, he does seem to struggle individually. I remember a while ago, he spoke about how sometimes he gives up too much of himself to try and allow for others to succeed, and then that then hinders his individual level. So he's got to make sure that that's not going to be a problem when they go overseas, and that we're going to get to see Doru at his peak, with some resources and contributing on an individual level. I've heard Marsh speak similarly in terms of how he likes to give up space, about how he likes to make sacrifices. And you can't have two players now who are both going to be compromising themselves individually for the rest of the team to succeed. So I'd say that's a bit of a concern there for me. Maybe a slight overlap in that regard from them. And then also just Oru's individual level is something that they're going to have to try and figure out. We've seen IGLs get chastised lately, like Hooksy or Carrigan if he has a bad game. Advent from Tyloo, probably the best example of IGLs who struggle massively as an individual. And then, a lot of people will come and say, what's going on there? You're costing the team. And it's way deeper than that. You can't just say, oh, numbers low equal reason team is doing badly, right? It's way deeper than that. But I do know that it's something that will need attention, is Doru's individual level. That he just needs to make sure that he does enough. It's not like he has to be top fragging and popping off, but there will be an element of responsibility in that aspect required. Of course, when it comes to the leadership, IGL, when it comes to the team and the synergy and the psychological side of things, he's got it waxed, man. That's not my concern at all when it comes to keeping the team together, that brotherhood, that camaraderie outside the server, the work ethic as well. I know he's an incredibly hard worker. I've heard such good things about him when it comes to how he was handling the struggles and the strife overseas when they weren't really performing at the level they would have wanted. So I've got no doubt in any of those departments for Doru. I think he's absolutely the right person for the job in South Africa as well. There's nobody else I'd pick to lead this project. I mean, I picked him as my leader a long time ago when they built this team. I said he should be the IGL. So it's not the problem there at all. Massive, massive fan of him in all those elements. I'm just need to make sure that we see him putting up the numbers required of him, to keep the team, make sure that they don't have a handicap in that regard and that they can't, target him. We've seen with Furia, with Kai gets targeted by teams, right? The Hooksy in the beginning when he joined G2, it was the same thing. If they find a deficiency, if they find a weakness on one side of the map, they're going to look to exploit it. And Doru needs to make sure that he isn't exploitable in that regard. And I fully back him and fully believe that he will be able to hold his own internationally. So there we go. That is the video. That's all I have to say. It's actually gone longer than I expected. Hope I wasn't waffling too much. Remember, this is going to take time. This is going to take time for them to find their footing, not only because they don't have a fifth yet, they're going to have to integrate that fifth into the team, and then we can start to see what they're capable of. It's going to take time, so let's not make any inferences early on. Let's give them that runway. Let's give them a couple months once they've gone overseas. And I'm just really excited to get to see them compete regularly, routinely, week in and week out. I mean, there's teams like Miles NXT, Permitter, Nexus. These teams are routinely playing like 100 plus maps every 3 months. Officials, not scrims, not games that are, including games ESEA Advanced or whatever it might be, where the games aren't even on HLT. That's on HLTV alone. These teams are playing 100 plus maps officials every 3 months. So there's so much Counter-Strike to be played in Europe here for this team. There's a number of qualifiers, online events, lower tier, higher tier. There's just going to be a lot of Counter-Strike for them to play. And I'm just really excited to see where they're going to be able to take things, where they're going to have so many reps behind them, right? They've got a great org, they've got great backing, they've got the sponsors, they've got the fans. Let's make sure we all continue to get behind our avocado brothers, spam those avocados in chat, give all the love and support to the players as they try and reach their dreams. And boys, go for this one, give it everything that you've got, because like I said, this isn't something that players from South Africa get to experience. You are one of a very few illustrious group out there in the country who will get a chance to go overseas, and this is a thing of dreams. So you guys make sure you go out there, you give this everything you've got, because I promise you now, you don't want to think back to this a few years from now and be like, damn, I really wish I'd done this differently, or I tried this a bit more. You go out there, you wring the towel, and you give this project everything that you've got, and by the end of it, it's not about the results, it's about the journey, right? So fall in love with the process, boys. Give it everything that you've got, and we're all behind you, and we can't wait to see what you guys are going to accomplish.